Welcome to CERT Rodeo in a Box, a training module, giving you and your CERT team additional training and skills to increase your effectiveness. As a CERT volunteer in a disaster situation, it's important to have an understanding of basic knots and rope rescue techniques. Their uses are countless. This course was excerpted from our own CERT Rodeo with the help of local rescue experts. It will walk you through rope and webbing basics and show you 8 invaluable knots, how to tie them, and when to use them. When it comes to knots, there's no substitute for hands-on learning, so be prepared to practice these knots in your classroom.
Hello, my name's Dan Kroll. I'm a captain with the Olathe, Kansas Fire Department. I've been in the fire service for 26 years now. I did my first 20 years on the trucks, mainly on our truck company and then on to our rescue. Since then I moved into our training division, and I now oversee most of our special operations group, which includes our rescue guys and our hazmat guys. Today we're going to go over an introduction into ropes and knots. We're going to keep it real basic, real simple. We're not going to teach you anything today where you're going to be able to go out tomorrow and do any rappelling or anything like that, but it's going to be enough to where you can review and practice and get up to speed on them. We're going to go over rope characteristics real briefly. I don't want to get too much in depth with that. The webbing also. Then we're going to get into the knots, how to use the knots, how to tie the knots, a little bit of our hitches. Ropes. Ropes start off in many different shapes and sizes. They've been around for hundreds of years. They started off just with the basic natural products, whether it was cotton or hemp. We usually just wove them into different things. We've now moved on to some of the examples you see here on the table. These are synthetic ropes. In the fire service and the rescue specifically, we use nylon. We'll show you some of the charts later on, and you can see the strength of them, the abrasiveness of them, and how well they stand up and why we've kind of chosen them to go along with. Rope fibers, rope construction, rope types. Again, we're going to hit that kind of real briefly and real rough. In the CERT field, you guys are going to just have, unless you brought something with you, just what you find out in the field to use. So I don't want to get too much into it. You have to be with ropes for a long time to be able to just pick up a piece of rope, understand what it's made out of, how it's made, and how that's going to work for you. But I do want you to have an understanding of just the differences between the ropes that we have out there. Natural fiber ropes, manila, hemp, cotton, all of those types of things. Polypropylene, nylon, polyester, some of the different ropes, fibers that we make things out of now. Instead of weaving them together, we're using different procedures to put the ropes together. This is just a little guide that you can look at. It goes across which types are the strongest, what they're good for and what they're bad for. And this is the other thing I want to warn you of. If you don't know how the rope has been taken care of, then you're really not going to know what it's rated for. It may be a 1/2-inch static current mantle rope like this. It comes from the factory at over 9,000 pounds of tensile breaking strength. But if I've left it out in the sunlight, it's been exposed to especially acids for nylon, it's going to degrade that to a point to where it may be as weak as a small piece of twine. So that's the dangers we're going to get into. But you can see from the chart, when it comes from the factory, kind of the condition it's in. If you have a rope that you can bring from home or that you have stored and properly taken care of, then you'll know what it is you're working with. But something you pick up off the street, it's really going to be a crapshoot what you're working with. Synthetic ropes. Probably one of the main reasons we've gone to them is they do resist mold and mildew. We can take them, we can get them soaking wet. All we got to do is lay them out, not in the sunshine, but lay them out so they dry up. They're going to be good to go. Very high melting point on them, even though it is nylon. That's kind of surprising. It's a lightweight rope for as strong as it is, like I said, 9,000 pounds or over 9,000 pounds, and it's non-conductive. So if we get into an electrical problem, as long as it's not soaking wet dry, it's non-conductive to electricity. Original rope construction, especially when we're working natural fibers, of course, they start off with a single piece of yarn. They would spin those into strands, and then when they would spin the strands into a rope, if they wanted to go to a bigger rope like they used on the old mariner ships, then they would start taking the ropes and spin those together. So they would just keep expanding until they got the size and really the strength that they needed. But to get something with the strength of a modern rope, you're ending up with a rope that's literally 4 or 5 inches in diameter out of a natural fiber. Rope constructions, 3-strand braiding, double braiding, all of those things, again, unless you're really familiar with a rope, You're not going to know just by picking something up off the ground. Static kern mantle. The kern mantle is what we use. You can see on the tip of this one, the kern or the core is the long nylon fibers. These are continuous fibers. You can have 1,000 foot of rope and it's one continuous fiber from one end to the other. And then it has the mantle or the protective, the abrasive part on the outside. That's what we like to use in the fire service. So mainly for us, the two different types of rope that we work for in the fire service are life safety ropes. Those are ropes that we're willing to put especially our own lives on. When we're doing rappelling, we're either going down or going up on a rope. We call those life safety ropes. We keep track of those ropes. We track the records, the forces they've been exposed to if we've had that rope out already before. And then any other rope that we have, anything like this, that once it's off the truck and we can't track exactly where it's been, this is a utility rope for us. Will it still hold 9,000 pounds? Probably, because it's been in our care, but we're not willing to risk our lives on it since it's out of that group that we call life safety. So those are the two main differences. All of our rope is 1/2 inch static kern mantle nylon rope, two different categories, life safety and just utility. Static rope. So static kern mantle, and the static means that it just doesn't stretch very much. That's what we really want in the rescue service, is if I set a victim off over an edge or I myself are getting ready to rappel, I don't want that rope stretching out and getting any longer because now I'm further down the edge than I want to be. So static is more or less a restriction on how much it'll stretch, around 2 to 4% depending on the weight we put on it. Dynamic rope is the rope they usually use in rock climbing because they do want that stretch in it because they do occasionally slip and fall and they want that bungee cord type effect to it. We stay away from that because we don't like that in the rescue world, but that's the difference between the two. You can see on your chart it shows different ways that they test this, and more or less what they do is they just wrap the rope around two different hydraulic objects and they just pull it until it breaks. They register what it breaks at, and again this 1/2 inch usually breaks at a little over 9,000 pounds. Very, very strong. Another chart, the chart just shows the different diameters, either whether it's in millimeters or in inches. The 3/8, you can see it's rated for about a little over 5,000 pounds. Again, that's what rock climbers usually use. Plenty good enough for them and what they're doing. We go to 9,000 pounds because we like a very huge safety margin. We like a 15-to-1 safety margin, and that's to put 2 people on the rope. Since we're doing rescue, we want that safety factor, including another person on the rope with us. Now we're on to webbing. And obviously the difference between the webbing and the rope is you can look at it and see the difference. It can either be a straight flat rope or webbing, or like this is a tubular webbing that's just laying flat. It's kind of puff it up as we go to it. It's tubular. Usually we use the flatter webbing for our higher weights. It's a stronger webbing. This as just a 1-inch webbing, it's a lighter weight webbing. We'll have to tie it together and use it to get the same strength as some of the other stuff. It's just a flat woven product. It's the same type of material. It's a nylon material, so it has the same strengths and weaknesses as far as what it will break at, but it also is degraded by acids, especially with the nylon. Again, another slide, another category. It tells you what the breaking strengths are. It tells you what it's good for and what it's bad for, the things that are going to interrupt it. So if you are buying something on your own, that's just a real good chart to refer to make sure it's not exposed to any of the things that are going to degrade it. Flat and tubular, thicker and stronger usually on the flat, usually a little bigger. We go up to 2-inch on our flat. Tubular is where we go down to our little smaller diameters, and it just has a hole through the center. It's just a tube. Flat webbing will go up to 9,000 pounds, so we're matching what it is for our rope. We want to make sure we're consistent on our strengths. Tubular webbing, and mainly because we're usually at smaller diameters, usually up to about 7,000 pounds. A nice slide showing how you can use webbing where they're wrapping it around a pole. You can see that it's been tied into a loop and then doubled up because we want our anchor to be stronger than our rope. So by doubling it up, making it into a loop, and then doubling it up again, we can increase the strength of it. The bottom picture shows it going around a tree. And again, because of the abrasive ability of this to not be cut or break under pressure, trees are not a problem with the bark. So we through all that, and now I think we're to the most important part, and that's when we do have a rope, the kind of knots that we can use and how to tie those knots. You can see from your handout under knots we have 8 basic ones. The huge majority of them are the figure 8 family. So once we get into the figure 8, you really learn in one knot just how to tie it in different ways. Hitches, really the difference between hitches and knots are When you tie a knot, even if you remove it from the object you tied it around, the knot still stays there. If you tie a hitch and you remove that object away from what you tied it around, the hitch will fall apart. And that's really the only difference between the two. The first one we're going to cover is an overhand knot, or the safety knot is what we call it. One of the things that you want to do once you're tying knots, especially until you're real comfortable with the knots, is always put a safety at the end of the knot just to make sure it won't come untied on you at an improper time. Anytime you tie a knot into a rope, you're going to reduce the rope strength by around 20%. I think there's a chart in your handout that'll show you exactly what the percentages are, but 20% is a good figure to use. Now, on a 9,000-pound rope, losing 20% of its strength is no big deal at all, but if I've got a rope, either because of its diameter or what it's made out of, it's only into the hundreds of pounds, and I reduce that by 20%, that can be something to be aware of, and we can kind of get away from that on some different things, especially with our hitches. So the overhand knot, this is the first one we're going to do, our safety knot. All we're going to do to start off with is we're going to put a bend in our rope, and that means we're just going to fold it over on itself. With this little portion right here, we're just going to take the end of it underneath and back into it. Kind of looks like a little bow tie type thing. This is the overhand knot, this is the safety knot. If we had a knot, a bigger knot in our rope right here, we would just tie this afterwards, tie it back onto itself to make sure it stayed. That's our first one. Okay, knot number 2 is a square knot. This can be either tying, usually it's tying one end of one rope to another. I'm going to use 2 different ropes just so I can get the contrast on colors so you can see the difference between the two. So we're just going to lay our first rope out. We're going to put our second rope over the top of it. This rope comes down underneath. So we end up with these 2 horn looking things. Now with this one, we're going to put this rope over the top again, go underneath, and pull. And you know you've got a square knot when both of your ends are on the same side of the knot and it flexes like that. Nice good knot, usually tied one end of the rope to another. Again, I just use the second knot just so you can see the contrasting colors to get a better view of it. I'm going to lay the 2 across. This one goes under. Back up, cross them, goes under, and pull. Okay, the next knot up is our first knot in our figure 8 family. It's just a basic figure 8. Some people call it a stopper knot. It's really called the figure 8 because when you're done it kind of has the resemblance of a figure 8. So the first thing we're going to do is make our bite. Then we're going to bring the rope back across. We're going to go underneath and then back up through my bite here. And when you're done, it has the resemblance of a figure 8. That simple. Bite, bring it over, underneath, and through. Next one up is a figure 8 on a bite. So we're going to take our rope and we're going to give it a bite. We're going to bend it in half. Make sure you start off with plenty of rope because this kind of uses up quite a bit. This is the one we use when we want to connect a rope to an object. Over there. So, same thing just like it was before. We're going to make our loop. Try to keep everything nice and flat. Then we're going to take our loop underneath and then back up through the hole. So we have our figure 8, only it's doubled, and we ended up with our non-slip loop here. This is what we hook our carabiners into, so when we want to attach our rope to a Stokes basket or to an anchor or to webbing or something like that. This is the one we use. This is the one we use the most often. Figure 8 on a bite. So the first thing we want to do is create a nice big bite. Then just like we did with it before, we're going to go across, create our loop, down underneath, and then back up through. Figure 8 on a bite. Good for connection, especially with our carabiners. Take it around. Underneath. Back through. There it is. The next knot up we're going to do is called a figure 8 follow through. So all we're going to do, that original figure 8 knot we tied, we're going to tie it, but we got to tie it further down into our rope. This is a knot that we can use to make an anchor if we don't have anything else to hook around. We can make this around a tree, around a pole, around a column, a post, anything we want to do. So we're going to start off just making our basic figure 8, but we're going to make it a little further down the rope so that we have a big enough tail to go around our object, and we're going to use this pole right here as this case. So we're going to make our first little loop, take our rope through, and then up through. So we start off with our basic little figure 8. Then we just have enough of a tail to go around the object we're going to use as our anchor. And then, since it's called the figure 8 follow through, we're just going to follow through back through our knot. So back up through the hole that we came through, and we're just going to trace around the knot as it exists. So we end up with what really is essential is a large figure 8 on a bite, but we were able to tie it around an object, figure 8 follow through. Really good knot to use just for a rope to make an anchor point. So figure 8 follow through. We're just going to start off by making just our first initial figure 8, just like we were before. Make sure that we have enough tail to go around the object that we're going to make the anchor out of. We're going to grab this pole right here, and then the follow through portion is simply following back through the knot just as it was before. So tracing right back around, following all the steps we did before. So we end up essentially with a figure 8 on a bite, only it's a rounded object. Okay, figure 8 on a bite. So we're going to make a basic figure 8 knot. We're going to go around the object. Then the follow through portion is the tracing of the knot back. Figure 8 on a bite around an object, or a figure 8 follow through. Next up is the figure 8 bend. It's going to be very similar to the follow through, only because it is a bend. It's something that we know we're going to use to tie two ropes together. So we're going to start off with our basic figure 8 knot. So first rope, there's our basic figure 8. On our second rope, we're going to do a follow through, but this time we're coming in tail to tail. So one rope into the other. And we're just going to trace around our knot again. So make sure you pull enough through so you have enough to tie. Retrace your knot. So again, a figure 8, but since this is a bend, we're using this to tie two ropes together. Figure 8 bend, tying two ropes together using the figure 8. Start off with our basic figure 8 knot. Leave it nice and loose. Get our second rope, and what we're going to do is trace back tail to tail. Make sure you start off by pulling enough rope through to do your trace back. And then we're just going to follow this knot around. Dress it up a little bit. Figure 8 bend. Next knot up, we're out of the figure 8 family. This is a bowline. This is a very, very old firefighter's knot. We kind of got away from it when we went into synthetic rope because the synthetic rope kind of slips in a bowline knot, but it's actually making a resurgence. Probably the only drawback to a bowline is that it does take about 30% of the strength out of your rope, so it is a little harder on your rope. But all we're going to do is we'll try to tie it here like it is in your book. So we're just going to make a loop. This is the part that we're going to keep. This is a non-slip loop that we're making. We're going to go back through the hole, underneath, and then come right back where we came through. Pull it tight, and there's your bowline. And what it creates is just a nice non-slip loop that you can use for a lot of different applications. So, basic bowline knot. Going to make our first loop. This is the part we're going to keep. We'll go up through the hole, around, back down through the hole, dress it up, basic bowline. Now we're on to the butterfly knot. The butterfly knot is the knot that we can tie anywhere in the middle of a rope. It's usually used a lot of times to make a place where you can create a handle in the rope to help pull onto the rope. It's also a spot where we can make a second connection point into rope if we want to hook two things onto a rope. One of the first methods you can do, and this is the one that works best if you're tying this right in the middle of a rope, just lay out a bight on the ground, give it one twist, give it a second twist, then it's going to lay out like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this first big bite, I'm going to bring it up and over, and then back up through this one. So I'm going to bring this back up and over, and then down and back through that other one. And I know that's going to be hard to see on the camera, so we'll have to do it a couple different times. That's a butterfly, and you can see where it makes a nice little handle in a rope so you can help pull on the rope, or if you're trying to hold or pull on the rope. It's also a good point if I needed a second carabiner and I wanted a second attachment point off my rope. That's the butterfly. So to tie a butterfly in the middle of the rope, we just have a bite. We're going to give it one twist. We're going to give it a second twist. So we end up with two of these loops. I want one of them a little bit bigger than the other. I'm going to bring this one up and over and then back up through here. So it's going to look something like this. Up and over. That loop goes underneath and back up. Dress it up a little bit. And there's your handle hold. Another way to tie a butterfly is just put it in your hand. So we're just going to loop the rope over your hand, and we're going to make two more loops across, always heading toward your thumb. So once across, second across toward your thumb. That second loop that came across, you're just going to pull it loose a little bit, and you're going to put it on the palm of your hand, push it through, and there's your butterfly. So another way to tie the butterfly is just put the rope over your hand, and we're going to go over two more times, always getting closer to the thumb. Closer to the thumb, closer to the thumb. We're going to grab that second one, pull a little slack, and we're just going to push that loop right up the palm of your hand. and that's your butterfly. Next up is hitches. We're pretty much done with our knots. First hitch we're going to do is a girth hitch. So if you have a piece of webbing, you're just going to kind of take it in half. You have the loop in here. Just put the loop around whatever your object is. You're going to push the free end back through. Once you pull all your slack back through, then it just snugs up. Nice quick way to grab a hold of something so you can hold on to it, the girth hitch. You're just going to go around the object with the loop, bring all your slack through. Girth hitch. Next hitch we're going to do is a clove hitch. A clove hitch is something that's really good to tie around a cylindrical object that tightens down onto it so you can actually pick a cylindrical object up. And when you're doing a clove hitch, all you really want to do is whichever direction you're going to travel with it, start on the bottom side or the outside first. Then when you're coming across again, you're going to go on the inside. And you're going to end up with more or less a double X or a double loop around the object. It tightens down and pulls across itself so you can actually pick up on a cylindrical object, and it really limits how much it slips. So we're just going to come across, go below the rope, come back around again. We've created this loop, push it through, you pull it tight, got that X, and then when you pull up it locks across itself and you can pick up a cylindrical object with it. This is called a Prusik hitch, and a Prusik is just a smaller diameter hose. This is a ½ inch, this is 3/8. It's more in millimeters, but that's the difference in them. You can see the difference. So if I want to be able to hook onto this rope and be able to attach something to it or pull onto it, a small loop with a Prusik or a smaller diameter rope is the way to do it. And all we're going to do is we're just going to make 3 wraps around this rope, and it's best just to do it with the knot because you can keep track of it. And then on that bottom loop, I'm just going to pull it back through. Dressing up the knot is the hardest part with this one. And as we dress it up, we just want all these coils to form up so that when I pull on this Prusik, it grabs a hold of the rope. You can see the slack forming here. That's a Prusik wrap or a Prusik hitch. So smaller diameter rope. We're just going to do some wraps. 1, 2, 3. And then we'll pull it out. We'll dress it up. And we can have these nice little coils that form up. That's a Prusik wrap. That wraps up our basic rope introduction. Very basic, simple knots, but I think if you find that if you can master these knots and what you can do with these knots, they'll be more than enough for what you want to do. Please practice them. Try to get with somebody that knows the knots. I would hate for you to start tying them wrong and then have to correct your actions. That's very hard to do. But the best thing to do is just practice these, practice these, practice these. Make sure you dress them up so you can really see the knot. You can compare them to the pictures in your handout. Or if you have somebody that can do an instruction on knots, practice with them. But other than that, thanks for being with us. That's your introduction to ropes and knots.